are trespassing, and that if this were my home, I'd be licensed to shoot you both.
Two women claim their exercise outing at a city park led to them being racially profiled by a Toronto bylaw officer. The city says the incident will be investigated. The women claim they were asked for ID and threatened with violence by the officer after trying to access fields at Centennial Park. They feel they were singled out because they are black. Chris Glover is live at the park near Eglinton and Renforth. And Chris, you spoke with the women who are making these allegations.
I sure did, but before we get to their comments, I want to just give you a bit of a sense of where we're standing right here. Most of this park here at Centennial Park is open to the public right now. You can see people enjoying the afternoon right now. But behind me here in Centennial Stadium, that is closed partly due to COVID, but even regularly you would need a permit in order to get over there. But from what I hear and speaking with many neighbors around this space, a lot of people certainly do go inside there. And yesterday morning, there were a lot of people who were in there that were exercising using the track. And when a white bylaw officer showed up, the allegation tonight is that he only targeted and threatened violence against the two black people who were in there using the field. The gates are locked at Centennial Stadium, and you're not supposed to go inside here, but people often do. Yesterday morning, Deborah Ampong and Eva Amamensa say the gate was open when they arrived, and they joined several white strangers to work out on the field. When a bylaw officer showed up, the whole group scattered.
He looks at us, and me and my friend Deborah, he goes, you know, you guys are trespassing right now, and if this was my home, I'd be licensed to shoot you both. So when he said that, I was like, this can't, like, I literally even blacked out. I was like, no, this is not happening to you right now. That already just tells me there's a racial attachment to that, especially what's going on in the world right now and in the U.S. You know, seeing people like me getting shot by people who are in authority.
After the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis, the world has been consumed with anti-black racism protests, calling for an end to police brutality towards black people.
You are racist, and I will make sure this goes every freaking where. You mess with the wrong black woman, the wrong one.
When the pair felt threatened and racially targeted, Amamensa started recording.
Then you have the audacity to say, because we're trespassing, you could shoot us? Are you crazy?
Again, I said no such thing.
Are you serious?
In the video, the officer denies threatening violence, later saying he was addressing the white soccer players anyway.
I believe I was addressing these people.
Was he talking to you? Was he talking to you?
You can rewrite history any way you want.
But the soccer players say the officer was only focused on the black women, at first asking for their ID and then wanting to write down their license plate.
I was actually very happy that they stood there still. They were actually able to confirm that, because honestly, if they weren't there, it would have literally been our word against the officer, and he would have definitely denied it, because he was denying it when it happened. He was denying it the whole time.
Originally, the city's Municipal Licensing and Standards Division was investigating, but after criticism of city employees investigating city employees, the investigation will now be independent.
When you have deeply concerning allegations like that, you do everything you can to ensure that the public is satisfied you're having an objective, independent investigation, so there's no suggestion that people are investigating themselves.
The pair want the officer fired, but are at least grateful for the conversation this incident has sparked about the implicit and explicit racism they say they face regularly.
If this was a month ago, definitely, it would be a different conversation. We probably wouldn't even be having this conversation, so.
The city is in the process of giving anti-black racism training to every city employee. But today, Mayor John Tory said that this story shows that those who are dealing with people in the front lines, they need to have that training fast-tracked so that everybody knows how to handle situations like this.
So, Chris, what about this specific bylaw officer that's facing these allegations? Is he still out dealing with the public?
During the investigation, the city says they won't tell us what his employment status is. So whether or not he's still working or if he's suspended, perhaps suspended with or without pay, they will not get into any of those details. But they did confirm that at this point, he is still a city employee. And I also asked if he had any other complaints or investigations on his record, but they did not confirm that either, Dwight.
Chris, thank you.
Thanks.
Another exclusive story now. Downtown condo landlord says a Toronto Blue Jays player is refusing to pay him thousands of dollars he owes in rent. Now, another landlord says a Jays coach wants out of the rental contract he signed earlier in the year. The landlords say the two team members are citing the pandemic and the shuttered baseball season as the reason why. John Lancaster with the exclusive details.
First career slam for Rowdy Tellez.
25-year-old Rowdy Tellez has made a good living playing pro ball. More than $1 million so far with the Toronto Blue Jays. But COVID-19 has stalled the baseball season. Players are only getting a fraction of their salary, and Tellez is stuck in the U.S. His landlord says Tellez paid first and last month's rent in March when he signed this lease, agreeing to pay $4,100 a month for a Toronto condo steps from the Rogers Centre. But since then, he's refused to pay any more.
They can't really make the decision like Ryan Tellez, no play, no pay. That doesn't have anything to do with the landlord. The landlord rented out their property. I rented out my property to him in good faith.
Jays first base coach Mark Budzinski is also claiming he shouldn't have to pay his rent. He signed a 6-month lease for $3,100 a month for a condo on Wellington Street West. He's paid 3 months' rent, but says the lack of a baseball season and a closed Canada-U.S. border should void his rental contract. Budzinski wants his landlord, Derek Thomas, to refund his rent payments.
You signed the lease agreement. It's a legal document. If you sign the legal document, you're supposed to honor your agreement.
Both landlords say they're out thousands of dollars in rent and still have to pay mortgages and maintenance fees on the empty properties. Pinizzato wrote to the Jays urging them to take control of their players and coaches to ensure they respect local landlords.
What are we teaching our kids if it's okay for a professional athlete to walk away from a contract because?
She says the team called her back, but the situation remains unresolved.
Both Tellez and Budzinski declined to speak with CBC News about this. So did the Jays. Meanwhile, Budzinski is asking Ontario's Landlord and Tenant Board to cancel his lease. The lawyers we spoke to say claiming COVID-19 is enough to get someone out of a rental agreement may be a tall hill to climb. John Lancaster, CBC News, Toronto.
Police have charged a 25-year-old woman in a hit and run that left a cyclist dead in Markham earlier this week.
The victim was a 50-year-old man from the city of Markham. He was riding his bicycle that morning on Carlton Road when he was struck by that vehicle that failed to remain. He was thrown from the bicycle and was there lying at the side of the road for probably quite a bit of time before he was found by a passerby.
York police responded to the collision in the area of Carlton Road and Old Ivy Lane on Monday morning. Officers found the cyclist with life-threatening injuries. He later died in hospital. The woman initially fled the scene, but investigators found security video that showed her car damaged. The woman also had allegedly filed a false police report about a crash. The 25-year-old is facing charges including failure to stop at a collision causing death. Multiple people were sent to hospital, vehicles were damaged, and the driver faces charges after 2 tires flew off a transport truck on the 401. Linda Ward spoke with one of the drivers who was caught in the chain reaction. Here are the details.
This is the culprit, one of a pair of wheels that came off an eastbound transport truck just before midnight. It bounced over the median into oncoming traffic, causing a violent chain reaction collision.
It was a blur.
Al Deli was driving home from work when he hit the wheel dead on.
And suddenly a huge unknown object came flying at me. No idea what it was at that time. I basically lost control of my car at that point, started to swerve, did a 360.
His car bounced off the guardrail and stopped in the middle of the highway.
I got out of the car, I went over to the side of the road to get out of the way, and soon after, 2 other cars slammed into the back of my car. It's very emotional seeing the EMS arrive. They couldn't get out of their cars, so it was jaws of life were required to extract them from their cars.
2 17-year-old girls were seriously injured and taken to a trauma center. 2 men were taken to local hospital. Everyone's expected to be okay. Deli's car was totaled, but he got away with only whiplash.
The outcome could certainly have been tragic, and we've seen many times in the past where flying truck wheels and even flying passenger wheels come bouncing across and smash right through a windshield into the occupants, causing serious, catastrophic, or even fatal injuries.
The OPP say these calls are usually due to improper wheel installation, and truck drivers are responsible to check them daily.
Either they weren't properly installed in the first place, they weren't retorqued, maybe there was debris, and once you lose the clamping pressure on these wheels, the fasteners can actually back off the studs very quickly, and by the time a driver realizes there's a vibration in the vehicle, it's too late and the wheels come flying off and they're grinding down the highway.
That mistake, Deli says, could have cost him his life.
It could have caused death. It could have caused major destruction. People's lives could have been turned upside down because of a moment of not paying attention, not doing your job properly.
Police found the truck off the highway in Pickering. The driver has been charged with wheel separation and could be fined up to $50,000. Linda Ward, CBC News, Toronto.
Some homes have been evacuated near Steeles and Yonge after a resident discovered an artillery shell in his yard. Toronto police say the man was digging in his backyard and found the shell. It was 2 feet long and 6 inches wide. As a precaution, nearby homes were evacuated and roads were closed. The explosives team was called in to the scene to remove the shell. Ontario's pandemic state of emergency has been extended until the end of the month, but for the 4th day in a row, the province is reporting fewer than 200 new cases of COVID-19. The province says there are 190 new cases of the disease. It also recorded 12 new COVID deaths. 24,205 tests were processed yesterday. According to the health minister, Ontario is now leading the country in daily testing. The TTC board has voted unanimously to make masks mandatory on subways, streetcars, and buses. The rules go into place starting July 2nd. The TTC will be giving out 1 million non-medical masks to transit riders, focusing on how low-income and marginalized communities that need them. Mayor Tory has said enforcement will not be a priority, but suggested riders could face fines for not wearing a mask in certain circumstances. There will be some exemptions to the rule, including children under the age of 2 and people with medical conditions. Mississauga firefighters are sounding the alarm tonight about their dwindling supply of N95 masks.
We have run into a critical shortage and no new supply available in the near future.
A memo issued to firefighters late last week directed staff to start wearing their self-contained breathing apparatus to medical calls. But putting on that equipment is time-consuming and it is also heavy. The concern is it could slow down the firefighters.
You're doing CPR with a 30-pound pack on your back. It becomes a little bit more difficult. The N95s give us a quicker response.
Mississauga's fire chief says they are working with fire departments in Hamilton and Ottawa, where they recently had the same problem. They are also asking the provincial government to share any stockpiled supplies of N95 masks. Protests and marches have taken place all across the world in the wake of George Floyd's death to fight against police brutality and systemic racism. In Mississauga today, students organized a demonstration to demand changes to their school board after a series of racial incidents prompted a probe by the province. Lauren Pelly was out at the protest, and she joins us live now from Mississauga. And Lauren, a lot of people showed up to that protest today.
Dwight, we're talking hundreds and hundreds of people are here today, and they marched around 7 kilometers all the way down here Ontario Street to Appeal District School Board office. Now here, this gathering is just a fraction of these people. These are the people waiting for this massive gathering behind me, this rally, this march that came all the way down the street. You can see the signs they're carrying right now with messages like defund police. They've also got signs saying things like Black Lives Matter. Tapping in, obviously, to a broader movement, but this is about something more specific. We're talking about systemic racism within the Peel School Board. I'm just going to quiet down for 1 sec because they're just walking up right now. I'll let you listen for just a moment. You can hear them saying Black students matter. This is the message of today. There was a recent report that was commissioned by the province suggesting the Peel School Board is dysfunctional and unwilling to address some long-standing concerns. There was also a third-party review of the board which found that Black students are only 10% of the secondary school population, but around a quarter of the students receiving suspensions. Now, we spoke to some of the parents out here today. Here's why one mother said she wanted to join this rally.
I just want my son to be able to have a chance. I'm glad that people are recognizing that now there's an issue, and I'm really hoping that there's going to be sustainable actions moving forward. I just want my boys to have a chance, that's all, because we didn't have a chance.
Lauren, it feels like we've been covering issues like this at this board for a long time now. Is there anything in motion to make change at the Peel School Board?
Well, it does seem, there is some momentum here today for sure. And Education Minister Stephen Lecce recently said the board must change, or he wants to take further action. The board has also said it's committed to addressing anti-Black racism. But Brampton MPP Kevin Yard, who was here today, he said that big changes are needed to fix these big problems. Take a listen.
Anti-Black racism, as I mentioned, is rampant in the Peel District School Board. Students have been called the N-word by teachers. A lot of them have been more or less scared to go to school. So at Queen's Park, we're continuing to push to make sure we fund the Anti-Racism Directorate so that we can make sure that the community gets the funding so we can get these initiatives done.
Now, the board has a deadline of June 22nd to address some of the issues that were raised in that report. That's just a few days away from now. In the meantime, these students, these supporters, they are out in droves calling for change. I'll just leave you with a final look at them, and we'll have more tonight on this at 11 o'clock. Dwight?
Lauren Pelly reporting live from Mississauga for us tonight. Thank you, Lauren. Experts at the Hospital for Sick Children are calling on the province to reopen Ontario's schools in September. The hospital releasing a document today with recommendations for reopening. They include increased protocols around hand hygiene and physical distancing, including separating desks and avoiding large gatherings. The document is also calling for symptomatic students to stay home and get tested for COVID-19. Researchers at Sick Kids have been studying the impact of the pandemic on children. They believe keeping schools closed will have too great of an impact on their physical and mental health.
A growing body of research tells us that a significant proportion of children have experienced increased depression, anxiety, irritability, and seem less able to buffer day-to-day frustrations.
I think we are now at a point where we know it's going to be around for a long time, and the alternative of having children not in school for months and potentially a year or two are just untenable.
The Ford government says later this month it will announce its plan for reopening schools in September. It also says it continues to prepare for a number of different scenarios. 1 year later and still champions, we take a look back at the Raptors championship parade a little later in the show. And Colin had the pleasure of covering that parade. And what was supposed to be about, I think we planned for a 2-hour show. I think ended up with 5, but it was all worth it. It was so much fun.
Yeah, you know what? I had a shout out to you earlier today, Dwight, on the radio, because I remember how long and what a great job you did stretching that out, because it went on so long and how much fun it was too. So looking forward to hearing that story and reminiscing about that. And hey, when you got a good thing, what do? You keep it going, right? That's what we're doing with the weather. We've got a good thing, and we're going to keep this going with sunshine coming right back at us for tomorrow as well, and a little while after that too. There are some exceptions though, so I got to go into some detail on that for you. For example, north of the GTA into Friday, later in the day, I think we're going to see some storms popping up, not necessarily severe, but we'll be seeing some of that. And by the weekend, the humidity is going to be coming up, so it's not just watering your lawn. You're going to be wanting to run through those sprinklers too because of the heat becoming more oppressive. Our current temperatures, 27 degrees right now. Now, in most cases, that breeze coming off the lake, so it's actually pretty pretty comfortable there. Our dew points, they've been kind of creeping up each day, but we don't have too much to deal with that humidity, as I've been saying. And in fact, what's been happening, because we're just seeing this high pressure really protecting us right across the Great Lakes, but this humidity from this system to the south is going to start to creep in here, and that's going to push those dew points up a little bit. But overnight tonight, you're not going to feel it. 14 tomorrow, 29, still comfortable. I'll tell you when things are going to get a little more oppressive. That's coming up, Dwight.
Thank you, Colette.
You're welcome.
The weather is brought to you by Trane, the most reliable heating and cooling brand. We test, so it runs. It's hard to stop a train.
A white police officer in Atlanta has been charged with 11 counts, including murder in the death of a 27-year-old black man. Richard Brooks was shot in the back twice Friday night. Brooks had been questioned by police for more than 40 minutes when he grabbed an officer's taser and ran off. A lawyer for the Brooks family said they weren't aware of details made public today as Garrett Rolfe was charged.
The shot happened after the deployment of the taser, where he started running again. That you would kick another human being after you just put 2 bullets in his back. But even in dark times like this, you have to try and see the light. And the positivity of this situation is the courageousness of Officer Brosnan to step forward and say what happened was wrong.
Officer Devin Brosnan has been cooperating with prosecutors. He's facing 3 charges, including aggravated assault. When we come back, a classic breakfast product is getting a new image and a new name after more than 130 years, plus why Ryerson is adding a new course to its journalism program.
We need to implement something where future journalists and students that are hoping to go into the industry have a proper understanding of how to report on Black communities.
I'm happy that they get to have this and see this type of representation within their school.
The owner of Uncle Ben's Rice says it will evolve the brand in response to concerns about racial stereotyping. Mars Incorporated didn't provide many details, but says it is responding to what it calls the voices of the Black community. Today's announcement follows a decision by Quaker Oats to retire the Aunt Jemima brand of syrup and pancake mixes. PepsiCo, which owns Quaker Oats, says it recognizes that the 131-year-old Aunt Jemima brand is based on a racial stereotype. PepsiCo also announced a $400 million initiative to help Black communities. A new course about reporting on the Black community will be offered to students this fall at Ryerson University, and it's all thanks to the hard work of a few journalism students. Alicia San has their story.
I truly feel like I'm speaking with the future of journalism. So I just want to thank you guys for taking the time to speak with me.
Thank you so much,
Ali. These 4 Ryerson students are about to graduate, and they're already changing curriculums. It's because of them that Ryerson School of Journalism will now offer a course called Reporting on Race, the Black Community in the Media.
We need to implement something where future journalists and students that are hoping to go into the industry have a proper understanding of how to report on Black communities and Black people in general. Based off of that, I just decided to, work with Tiffany and Rose and Sarah on creating a petition.
Within days, their petition for the new course garnered thousands of endorsements. Ryerson took notice, and the program will be offered to 3rd and 4th year undergrads and master's students this fall.
We started FaceTiming each other, sending each other text messages, and pretty much creating kind of like an outline of what we want out of this course. And I believe that all of the stuff that we put together came from personal experiences like myself. I wanted to have more Black guest speakers as well as more Black instructors because throughout my 4 years, I kind of felt like I wasn't pleased with the fact that I didn't see somebody that resembled myself in the industry come talk to us about how they got into the industry.
We even made a list of people, local Black Toronto journalists, who they should call on if they're ever having a panel or ever having a class discussion on a certain topic.
The soon-to-be grads will consult along the way.
What are the different ways that a news report, for example, can let down a community?
I found myself noticing a lot of both covert and overt racism, but specifically within language used in certain articles or the placement of voices, the way that you frame a Black person in a story or a Black community in a story, and certain assumptions that can derive from that.
A lot of it was just a big group effort, and ever since we discussed with faculty, we were able to have a say in what was going in this course and who was going to teach it.
They're looking for instructors right now.
This should be a Black Canadian journalist. They don't have to be in Toronto because we're going to be teaching remotely this fall. So anyone who's wondering if this is their time, who can come to the table with industry experience and lived experience, we'd love to talk to them. We're excited about this.
I thank you so much for helping carve and mold better journalists going forward, because we need that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
so
you.
much. Thank you.
My alma mater. All right, we look back at the Raptors championship parade 1 year later when we come back. Plus, I speak with a young musician who wants to say thank you to you.
All the Canadians that stepped up. You guys were all the quarterback that gave me that touchdown pass. So I'll always be really grateful for that.
Less than half of children are meeting the minimum daily requirements for physical activity. That's according to a new study from Participaction. And there's concern that with the pandemic, that number is now much lower. Greg Ross explains.
They're not the kind of marks a parent would ever want to see on their kid's report card, but it's especially bad because these grades can affect their health.
The overall physical activity grade is a D+ right now.
Mark Tremblay is the chief scientific officer behind the report card released by Participaction. It looks at kids aged 5 to 17 and includes information collected up until February of this year before the pandemic.
Best available evidence from Statistics Canada shows that 39% of kids are meeting the minimum physical activity target of 60 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity per day.
But that number gets far worse when you include a couple of more key factors.
We add in screen time and we look at sleep behaviors, a combination of which is referred to as the 24-hour movement guidelines. We're getting a failing grade. Approximately 12 to 15% are meeting those just basic living guidelines.
Now throw in a pandemic, and Tremblay says that number drops to less than 3% of kids meeting basic standards.
And when you're inside, as you and I are right now, we move less. I mean, it's just fundamental. We sit more. We probably eat more than we need to. We don't get fresh air. We don't get the exposure to the sun, which is required for vitamin D.
Would you guys rather be exercising or playing on the computer?
Playing on the computer.
Megan Trewortha-Lettingham says she's taken it upon herself to motivate her 6-year-old twin daughters, Devin and Lachlan, to stay active. It doesn't hurt that Trewortha-Lettingham is also a personal trainer.
We might get out for a bike ride, we might get out for a big walk. There might be a picnic at the end of that at our final destination so that we can go a little further and it's more fun.
She says just like when kids are in school, she created a routine for her daughters while they're at home.
Incorporating something into a routine makes things easier, and once the kids are expecting to do that, there's less pushback.
Tremblay says more families need to get active because if they don't, there will be consequences.
I'm hoping that this is not the new normal for Canada. Otherwise, we're in, a generation from now, we're in very serious circumstances with accelerated chronic disease situations.
Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
Tennis Canada says the Rogers Cup men's tennis tournament will not be played this year in Toronto at York University because of COVID-19. It is being postponed until August of 2021. The annual tournament rotates between Toronto and Montreal. The men's event will happen in Toronto when it resumes. The women's event in Montreal was postponed earlier this month. Tennis Canada considered holding the event without fans at the Aviva Centre, but decided against it due to travel restrictions and the potential impact on public health. It has been 1 year since millions filled the streets of downtown Toronto to celebrate our Toronto Raptors championship with a parade like this city has never seen before or might not see again. Today, COVID-19 has those same streets empty. CBC Sports' Jacqueline Dory takes us down memory lane.
It's hard to believe, but it's already been 1 year since the Raptors championship parade when millions of fans flooded the streets of Toronto to celebrate the 2019 NBA champions. Now, it kind of goes without saying, but a lot's changed since then. And I'm not only talking about Kawhi no longer being a Raptor, I'm talking about the global pandemic. So let's go down the exact same route the Raptors took and relive some of those amazing moments, but also see how much has changed.
Take away from my one that I had before. It was crazy, but obviously it's a little different. You have a whole country behind you, and it's their first championship, and supposedly 2 million people out here. I don't think they can fit that in most cities.
The city is amazing. Look at the turnout, and we ain't even halfway there, and we've been on the boat or the bus for 2 hours. Coming to you live for the big city with the greatest in the world, the champions. We got one with the dip.
That was amazing.
Well, there you have it. What should have taken 2.5 hours ended up taking 4. Thousands of people were in Nathan Phillips Square to meet the team, and it was an amazing day to end an amazing season.
Yeah! What it do, baby?
Now, regular viewers of this program, they know that both Colette and I are huge basketball fans, and oh, how wonderful it is to relive it. And Colette, we're still champions.
Oh, we are. That's right.
We're still champions. We're going to hold on to
champions.
that trophy for a little while longer.
That's right. And it's so amazing having the broadcast center downtown. So I was able to run away from, on my break, just run down the street. It was only a block and a half away. Catch a few minutes of the parade and then get back here to work. So, oh, what a day that was. And the contrast, I mean, oh my goodness. Yep. We're still champions. And championship weather, we have it. Oh my goodness, do we ever. 27 degrees. That is the temperature right now. Not the daytime high. I mean, also the daytime high, but it's still 27 degrees right now. Hamilton, a little cooler, 25. St. Catharines, 26 at the moment. I put the Humidex on here, but do you notice, I mean, it comes up maybe 1 or 2 numbers. That's about it. So it's still really, really comfortable. That will be changing as we go towards the weekend. We're going to see those values going up to those upper 30s, and it does become really oppressive. Gets much stickier. So this is the time to enjoy it. Saturday, Sunday, yeah, it's not nearly as nice. So we're still seeing that high pressure that's in place. This is going to be with us for a while. So it's really blocking everything out. So we're seeing this has to go kind of around this precipitation up here going way, way, way up towards the north. And this area of low pressure down here that's continuing to give the rains and the flooding rains there that they've been seeing in the Carolinas, that's going to start to push some of that humidity our way. It's trying to bring up some of that rain towards Lake Erie towards tomorrow. I really think it's going to stay towards the southern shores of Lake Erie and not make it across that international border. As we go into Friday, however, north of the GTA, we will see some pop-up showers there. So some thunderstorms popping up perhaps into cottage country, so highly isolated. And again, not into the city with those. It's not really till we get to later Sunday night into Monday morning that we have our next best chance of seeing in the GTA some precipitation. So overnight tonight, there you go with your overnight temperatures. Those are close to seasonal, just a little bit above. Tomorrow, good 5 degrees above seasonal with our daytime highs, 29 degrees. And then we're getting even warmer and getting even stickier as we go towards the first day of summer on Saturday, Dwight.
Looking good, though. We'll take it. Thank you, Colette.
You're welcome.
Viewers may remember young trumpeter William Leathers. We spoke to him when he was accepted to Juilliard, one of the most prestigious music schools in the world. He had the talent, but not the financial resources to attend. He started a crowdfunding campaign, and we shared his story with CBC viewers and listeners. Donors stepped up, and he was able to raise enough money for his first 2 years at Juilliard in NYC. Now, that was 2 years ago. Mr. Leathers recently reached out to us because he wanted to say thank you to his donors and also bring us some good news about his next 2 years at Juilliard. We started the conversation by talking about the crowdfunding campaign that started his Juilliard journey.
That was very, very successful. People stepped up very generously, and people got me through the first 2 years of Juilliard. And so now I've been awarded with the Kovner Fellowship, which covers all of my fees now. So now I don't have to worry about any fees.
So hold on. Through the crowdfunding, viewers and listeners were able to help you raise enough to get you through the first 2 years. But now we understand that they've so recognized your talent, and you've got that 4.0 grade point average, which also helps a little bit. And because you've been this incredible student, the school is now giving you a scholarship to pay for the last 2 years.
That's right, yeah. So the Kovner Fellowship is based on recommendation by the faculty. It's based on your grades, so I did get that 4.0 GPA. And also based on the amount you do in the Juilliard community, the amount of work you do in the Juilliard community.
I mean, what do you have to say to Canadians as this young Canadian kid with a dream to attend one of the most prestigious music schools on the planet? You have the talent to be there, but you don't have the funds. I mean, what do you have to say to the Canadians who stepped up to say, hey, we're not going to let this young Canadian's talent go to waste?
I just can't really thank everyone enough, honestly, all the Canadians that stepped up. I wouldn't be in the position to get a Kovner if it wasn't for all of you. So the Kovner really feels like a team win. You guys are all the quarterback that gave me that touchdown pass. So I'll always be really grateful for that.
And it's worth about 100,000 Canadian a year, which is pretty
That's
cool
right,
too.
yeah.
When I spoke to you 2 years ago, you always had this desire. You said, I won't let people down, and if they help me with this, I promise to give back. And you're trying to give back with a beautiful rendition of "O Canada." Talk about why you made this video and what you hope to achieve with putting it out there like this.
So a lot of students graduating this year, the class of 2020, unfortunately, due to the coronavirus, they're not going to get to have a real-life graduation ceremony. So I thought I would do a video of my rendition of "O Canada" to give them sort of a feeling of live music for their virtual graduation ceremonies.
You're being a little humble here, Mr. Leathers, and you're not, when I asked you how things were going at Juilliard, you didn't talk about the fact that, we did talk about the 4.0, but didn't you play principal trumpet at Carnegie Hall? Then you get to meet some celebrated music. So talk about some of that.
Yeah, for sure. So I got chosen to play principal trumpet on Mahler's Fifth Symphony at Carnegie Hall this year. It ended up being the last concert of the Juilliard Orchestra season due to the pandemic. So I got very, very lucky that I still got to play that concert. And so that was inside the Perlman Hall at Carnegie Hall. And so Mahler's Fifth Symphony is a very big piece for the principal trumpet. There's that 12-bar solo at the beginning, and then the orchestra comes in at bar 13. So it's all trumpet alone. It's just a trumpet call at the beginning of the funeral march. It felt very energizing to play that because that's a solo that every trumpet student, every classical trumpet player everywhere practices from a young age up until the moment when they finally get to play it. And so I've been practicing that excerpt since I was about 12, 13, and I finally got to play that. And years and years of practicing that, and then finally getting on stage. All it really took to get that solo going on stage was, okay, just get the first note and I'm going to be okay. So I played the first note and the rest of it was kind of on automatic.
You've made us proud so far. We're very happy for your success and lots more, I'm sure, in the future. So thank you for coming back to say thank you to the viewers and listeners that helped you. And also thank you for giving us this update and just how great you're doing, because, William, we kind of knew you'd be doing some great things in your future. Congratulations, sir.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
After a long, hopeful campaign, Canada failed in their bid to win a seat on the United Nations Security Council. More on the close vote coming up next. Canada has lost its bid for a seat on the United Nations Security Council. It was one of 3 countries vying for 2 of the temporary positions, won by Norway and Ireland. It is disappointing and a disappointing defeat for the Trudeau government, which conducted a 4-year lobbying effort for that position. Stephen D'Souza with more now from New York.
After years of whining and dining, campaigning, and lately with the coronavirus, phone calls and webinars and web meetings, Canada failed today in its bid to win a Security Council seat. The voting, though, was close, and observers say that's a testament to how well Canada did in its campaign. Here's how the totals ended up. Norway, which was seen as the favorite for one of the 2 seats available for the Canadian group, won with 130 votes. Ireland, seen as Canada's closest competition, they came in with 128 votes, Canada with just 108. Now, both Norway and Ireland were seen as the favorites, in part because of their spending on the international stage, as well as their efforts in peacekeeping. Some of the biggest criticisms against Canada was that it started its campaign late. Ireland, for example, had been campaigning for this for almost a decade. There's also some criticism that Canada tended to side too much with Israel and not the Palestinians at the United Nations, and that may have hurt it with some of the Arab countries who were voting today. Canada, for its part, spent about $2.4 million on this bid, and that included everything from Broadway tickets to a Celine Dion concert. There was also high-level diplomatic activity. The Prime Minister had a trip to Africa back in February, and as I mentioned, there was a lot of calls and video and web meetings in the last few months because of the pandemic. The Prime Minister himself calling dozens of world leaders in the last few months to personally pitch and make Canada's case. But ultimately, it wasn't enough, and so now it's been 20 years since Canada has been on the Security Council, 10 years since it lost its last bid. Being on the Security Council was a high priority for the Prime Minister and the Minister of Foreign Affairs. So the question now is, how will Canada achieve its goals on the world stage without a powerful and influential seat on the UN Security Council? Stephen D'Souza, CBC News, New York.
Thousands of people craving nostalgia turn to his accounts, which show people and places in our city throughout history.
I'm from Vancouver, and I moved here about 15 years ago. And perhaps that's why I became so interested in Toronto history.
I'm Talia Ricci, and coming up, we meet the man behind the Old Toronto series.
So lately, when people reference the old days, they are likely talking about pre-pandemic times. But one Toronto history buff really digs deep into our city's past. His Old Toronto series on social media has thousands of followers. Talia Ricci caught up with the man behind the project.
I'm going to do what I do every day and walk through the neighborhood for about 3 hours.
I'm with Morgan Cameron Ross, the founder of Old Toronto series, and I let you choose the spot today.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell me about where we are?
Well, right now we're at Harvard Street Bridge in Bickford Park. And it's one of my favorite places in the city wherein when I moved here, it just looked like this really out-of-place railing here. It's so old and grandiose, but it's like this because the bridge is still there underneath. So we would be standing about here on the north side of this bridge, and this is all covered up. Seemingly floating in the air, the 5 interconnected pavilions behind me were the architectural centerpiece of the entire project. I started Old Toronto series. I was in grad school at York studying Canadian history. So I just started this Instagram because the City of Toronto archives have all these great photos. And I thought, you know, the general public needs to see these things. These are pretty cool.
She helped the Canadian soldiers in the Old Knox College building right here at Spadina and College.
I do numerous things. A lot of kind of before and after photos, archival photos of what it looked like at a certain time and what it looks like now, as well as the video series, which is, you know, short mini docs about the history of small local things.
By the mid-1870s, Toronto would set up a isolation hospital in Riverdale, wherein patients suffering from smallpox, diphtheria, TB, scarlet fever, and measles would be quarantined.
And you're not originally from here.
I'm from Vancouver, and I moved here about 15 years ago. And perhaps that's why I became so interested in Toronto history, because I came at it from almost a tourist's perspective. I'm always amazed when I look back at historical photos of Kensington Market. It always feels as though half the photos are just people walking around carrying live chickens. Quite the juxtaposition to how it is today with all the vegan and vegetarian restaurants and cafes.
Are there any funny, relatable, or like quirky posts that you can kind of think of specifically that got a big reaction?
I found a 1840s poster of a real estate auction, and I posted it, and pretty much no one found it interesting. And then I will post a photo of, you know, a Corningware pot, and everyone loses their mind because their parents had that in the kitchen. So,
what do you think it is about history and nostalgia that just resonates so much with people?
I think everyone's really interested in kind of learning something new every day, especially about their neighborhood and their city. So, you know, I think there's a lot of civic pride this last few years in Toronto, so I think I've kind of tapped into that.
We should have pride in our town. That is our show for tonight. Thank you for joining us. Mike Wise has your next local news tonight after the National at 11. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 6. Stay safe and have a great night, everybody.